Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner. And once again, we have Aubrey Barnes and Ethelyn Baker from the Community Awareness Alliance. Now, Aubrey, I want you to pick back up and talk about that program that you were talking about back in part 1 for me.
Yeah, and so as I was saying, the whole idea is addressing the problem head on, homelessness, and making sure that they have homes. Because that, from our perspective, that revitalizes the whole community. I mean, there are people who may walk down the street unaware of what may be wrong with someone and feel uncomfortable if they don't understand someone's process or what they're going through. Mm-hmm. So if we address that issue, we're not just addressing it for them, we're addressing that for us as well. So what we're doing at this point is on October 10th, we're hosting the first World Homeless Day in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Oh, wonderful. Tell me about it.
Yeah, and so what that basically is about is a day that we the world internationally. Homelessness is recognized around the world. Okay. So we're deciding as an organization to go ahead and do something like that for the awareness part of our organization and to encourage members of the community to participate. So right now we have schools involved, like we have a weekly a monthly radio show with Fayetteville State University. Methodist College has also, and Fayetteville Tech they have also reached out to us and say they would love to participate, the students there, and so we're discussing things, you know, with businesses within the community for us to come together, recognize that this is an issue within our community that we need to address, and so that we can highlight the issue and come together and try to find out ways to resolve that issue.
That is wonderful. Okay, all right. Now, homelessness has various categories. Can you inform the broader population of the differences within these categories? And of course, I'd like to know too. And why as a community should we be motivated to become involved in advocating the eradication of this issue, particularly in Fayetteville and the surrounding counties?
Well, homeless does fall into various categories. As I mentioned earlier, you have what you call the sheltered. The sheltered are persons who have somewhere to go and are during the day or evening, that is. For an example, homes, the Salvation Army, for an example, is considered a sheltered place. You also have persons who may be displaced because of weather conditions, and they may be housed in hotel, motel, which a government agency may pay for, or you may have persons who may be living with relatives, or persons who may be living in a rental, a boarding house, for an example. Those are considered sheltered. And to address a particular thing regarding the sheltered, for an example, people who are domestic violence victims are considered sheltered, although it may be temporary. They are housing and urban development. HUD has certain categories. They have what they call the literally homeless. For an example, people actually have no place to go. Those are considered literally. Then we have persons who may not be, say, literally homeless, but they may be temporarily sleeping on someone's couch. For an example, people are considered homeless in that particular manner. Also, persons who may be teenagers who may be out of home because they decide to run away for whatever reason. And if they're under 18, they may be considered homeless without an adult. But if they're living with an adult, well, that particular person who's considered adult is also considered homeless. So I would like to just mention concerning the persons who may be in a shelter, may be sheltered, but yet have to leave the facility during the day. I was involved at one time with the organization here. I was involved with a particular group who the churches would call Interfaith Network, where various churches would house people during the day. But once they at the end of the day or early in the morning, they would have to leave. And because many of them want people to seek work, sometimes we have negative attitudes toward the homeless. We think the myth, homeless people are lazy, don't want to work, don't want to be on the street. But that's not always true. So many times the people who run the shelter or who may be in charge of their time have this negative attitude and want the homeless to leave during the day so they could seek work or not just sit around. To give you an example of what I'm saying is that during the time I was involved at the church I attended at one time, I was a member of the church, I was in the missionary society, and we met a young person who was seeking help and was promised to get help at the end of the service, but that person did not get the help, and we discovered that the person had been at the Salvation Army at one time, but she had problems there, and she did not really want to go back, but we took her back there anyway, and the gentleman who was on the guard there told us she could not come back because she did not want to get up in the morning and get out like the others did. So I asked the young lady where she was going. She said she was going to go to the library, but at that time the library wasn't open because it didn't open until 2 o'clock. It was about 1:30 then. So I said, what are you going to do after that? She said, I don't know. But do you know what happened? I took her home with me, and I found out the young lady was very industrious. She got up early. I had to leave the house about 7. She was ready before I was ready. So that particular person at the door, he had already formed an idea about her being lazy, not willing to get up and do what she should do. So the fact is that sometimes the people who are in charge of these facilities, not all of them, have attitudes toward the homeless. Mm-hmm. So as far as the various categories, let me just mention one other one. People who are running away from domestic violence. For example, a mother who has for years hesitated to leave because the fact many times people hesitate to leave a domestic violence situation because they have children they have to take care of, they have no other income, so they have to leave. But when they finally leave, they're put into a shelter temporarily. Mm-hmm. So those are different, I mentioned those various categories that I just mentioned.
Well, thank you, Ms. Evelyn. You did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Aubrey, would you have a comment for that as well?
Yeah, and to add on to what Ms. Evelyn is saying in terms of unsheltered and things of that nature, sometimes there are students who come to school and perhaps financial aid can't cover room and board, and they find themselves in those situations. Maybe they can't get information about the parents, and they're not considered independent students. So I believe there are a couple of students who may even currently be in a situation like that. So there are just a variety of reasons. And so our thought is the eradication of homelessness, the stability of people within homes, aids them in their resourcefulness. It aids them in their energy. That continuity and stability probably addresses a lot of some of the mental issues. Those are other aspects of homelessness.
Exactly.
Like Ms. Evelyn was saying, sometimes it's a difficult situation, so to be depressed, or there may be other reasons. We have opioid addictions. I mean, there are just so many aspects to it, so it's difficult to paint it with a broad brush. But if we look at these issues, like we're talking about the community day center, and hopefully if the community participated, healthcare, identify, what is the issue per person and things of that nature, then we can possibly put together something that will be able to address a broad spectrum of what the homeless issues are, and try to address it that way.
Okay, all right. Mm-hmm. So what is needed in terms of policy initiatives that the organization finds that can work in this area?
Well, I'll go back to our initial, like we said initially, we are concerned about the community day center. Mm-hmm. We know that is not a full answer to the issue.
Exactly.
But at least, like Ms. Ethelyn said, you know, during the daytime, they have someplace stable to be or safe to be, where hopefully that community day center will also have resources to aid them in the process of in the transition of homelessness. And then we've also thought about the help program as a group, you know, that we would like to proceed and work towards as we get more inclined and more get more funding and things of that nature. And then also we want to consider women and children. We are concerned about children going to school and not having the stability at home to be able to do homework and things of that nature, and that affects their academic performance in school. And sometimes teachers or the school may not understand that they're going through this problem. So then you have an additional issue. So hopefully we will have them take the money that was sent to the City Council to begin doing something for homelessness in the community with that $5 million that was given by FEMA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about FEMA as well. What kind of assistance and what kinds of things is FEMA doing to support this as well?
Well, from what we understand at this point, the $5 million was awarded to the county commissioners and city council, and so that is why Ms. Ethelyn and Brother Willie had been going down there to find out, okay, with this that's there, what plans do you have?
Exactly.
And then they were like, well, bring your suggestions. So we've come up with the suggestions. Like she mentioned, she suggested the help program, and we've also mentioned the community day center. And so we're in that space to find out what it is that they will do now that we've afforded them this information in terms of what we think would be the best situation, especially with the revitalization of downtown. So that's where we are.
Okay.
May I interject?
Sure.
Regarding the policies you just mentioned, I think the city council and the county commissioners need to think in terms of what is important, what is their priority. Although at this time they are working on certain things regarding improving, you know, the stadium, for an example, and they're thinking about the Performing Arts Center. And although people may not really be aware, but there's also in the plans what they refer to as the Civil War Reconstruction Museum Complex. That's still in the making, although we have not heard a lot about it within the recent months. But I think as far as they need to, city council officials, the city officials for their county or city need to think in terms of readjusting their priorities. Because my view is that although we have these various things in the making regarding the Performing Arts Center and the stadium, they will last for some years, but they're going to have to rehabilitate them. What about people's lives? You have to renovate or repair these buildings at some point in time, but yet what about having an effect upon people's lives? So that is really my concern regarding that. Now, as far as the FEMA, the funds, there was an article in the paper, and I did cut part of it out, that I brought concerning the fact that some funds have not been distributed to the state, that FEMA, the federal government, is holding up things. And then the federal government says they've distributed, but the state is holding up things. They are slow. They claim there are some funds have not been distributed because some people still waiting for Matthew funds, which occurred in 2016. We've had floods since that time. This is 2018, 19 that is, and here we are. So I think, in my view, the policy, the officials need to think in terms of what's most important, their priorities in order.
Okay. Well, I thank you, Ms. Barnes, and I thank you, Ms. Baker. It's been a wonderful conversation about homelessness. I thank you, viewing audience, for looking at the Bronco Exchange. I'm your host, Dr. Shanessa Fenner. Have a good one.
Familiar stranger who got me so very much Hypnotized, familiar street.